In this training, I am going to pose a very specific challenge to you. Specifically, I am going to challenge you, and I'm going to show you how in the next 3 months you can achieve more than you have in the last 5 to 10 years. But before I do that, I'm going to explain to you the 4 core problems for why you probably won't, and for why most people are going to not only make almost zero progress in the next 90 days, but why we are in the apex of one of the most difficult storms socially and politically that any of us have ever been in. In the next 90 days, we not only have a political election in the United States, but 49% of the countries in the entire world are having political elections. We have economic upheavals. There is a lot going on that is working against you. Even in a good period of time, I'm going to show you why most people, and likely you, are having a hard time making progress. But in this context, the odds are stacked against you. I'm about to show you exactly what we're going to cover in this training, but before I do, let me remind you of my purpose: to show you frameworks and science for how not only you can make it through this storm, but how you can quantum leap above this storm, how you can make more progress in the next 90 days than you have in the past 5 to 10 years. That is my challenge for you. That is what I'm about to show you how to do. First, I'm going to explain to you the 4 core reasons why you will likely not make massive progress during these next 90 days, and why most people don't make very much progress even annually. Then I will show you my 3-step framework for what I call strategic psychology, which is how you can achieve literally impossible goals. I'm going to show you a new framework of time, explaining to you the psychology of time and why psychologically time is not a reality. It is a tool for transforming your life. Then I'm going to show you the science of impossible goals. And yes, there is science for achieving impossible goals, even in impossible timelines. Once you begin applying this science, you will weed out at least 80% of what's going on in your life right now, because at least 80% of what is going on in your life right now comes from your past, but not from your future. In so doing, I'm going to show you the difference between good strategy and bad strategy. Most people have bad strategy, meaning they have conflicting goals, conflicting interests. They have what is called a complex system of life. You can't accelerate a complex system. You have to make your system simple, as Steve Jobs said, if you want to begin moving mountains. Part of this is understanding the psychology of loss and risk, and how this is going to hold you hostage and keep you stuck in the past. One of the biggest insights coming out of psychology in the last 50 years is a concept called loss aversion. And avoiding loss is largely what's going to keep you from achieving massive progress in your life, from letting go of the 80% or more of things holding you back. Finally, I'm going to show you what happens when you go all in on what is called the crux, which is the core bottleneck that needs to be solved if you want to begin achieving impossible goals. I'm going to show you that chances are you don't even know what that crux is. You might not even know what your core objective is. And there's a lot of noise going on, not only in your life, but in the outside world, that is stopping you from uncovering that crux, let alone going all in on that crux. After laying out these problems, the frameworks and the science, I want to apply it to you and your own 10-year goals. I want us to use time as a tool rather than a reality, and take your 10-year goals and reverse engineer them in the next 90 days. Yes, the next 90 days. While most of the world is in commotion and in distraction, and they will be left in the wreckage of this storm, this social, this political, this economic storm, you and I are going to quantum leap above this storm. I'm going to show you in this training how you and I can make more progress in the next 90 days than you have in the last 5 to 10 years. Before laying out the 4 core problems for why you won't progress, let me give a quick introduction of myself. This is a picture of me and my beautiful family, my wife Lauren, who's my dream girl. The first time I saw her, I wanted to marry her. This is actually a picture about a month ago of a very special day for us. As part of our own spiritual and religious tradition, we were able to adopt our 15-year-old daughter, Rosemary, who's from Guatemala. It was miraculous, it was special, it was beautiful. The other 3 older kids in this picture are ones we adopted from the foster system while I was doing my PhD in organizational psychology. After 3 years of battling the foster care system in court, and they really made it hard for us, we were able to adopt those 3 kids. And literally, after years and years of trying to get pregnant, after fertility treatment, she was able to get pregnant with our twin girls literally a month after our adoption. And they were born the same year we adopted. This was in 2018. We went from 0 to 5 kids that year, adopted 3 kids, had twins. That was one of the most intense years of my life. My first book, Willpower Doesn't Work, came out that year. And since then, we've had our little guy Rex, who you can see in the picture, and even since been able to adopt Rosemary. Lauren and my 7 kids are the reason I do what I do. They're the reason why I don't get stuck in my past self. They're the reason I don't fall back to my past. I had a tough past. Growing up, my father was an extreme drug addict. My parents got divorced. I went through hell. I barely graduated high school. I played video games all day. I barely made it through. My wife and kids are the reason I don't default back to a life of addiction, to a life of depression, to a life of trauma, but instead, why I pursue a seemingly impossible future self, not only for myself, but for them. As I told you, I did my PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. This is leadership psychology. This is strategic psychology. In my master's, I studied the difference between wannabe entrepreneurs versus real entrepreneurs, and I uncovered a very important topic, which I called the point of no return. This is psychologically when you shift from avoiding what you don't want to fully committing and pursuing that which you absolutely want. In psychology, motivation is broken into two categories. You're either avoiding what you don't want or you're approaching that which you want. And this point of no return is an identity shift. It's when you stop defaulting to your past self, to your fears, to thinking about all the things going wrong, and you go all in. You actually begin investing fully in your future self. My dissertation research studied transformational leadership. This is one of the core theories of leadership. This type of leadership transforms your team. It gets your team from fulfilling a job to doing things that they never thought were possible, to committing specifically to results that are above and beyond anything that they've ever done. One of the things that I have found in training, literally at this point now, thousands of business owners and leaders, is that almost all of them have goals that are too small. First off, in identifying the A players on your team, but also if you do have really phenomenal people on your team, most of these business owners that I have trained, their goals are too small that they are limiting and frustrating their best players. While I was doing all of my PhD research, I was very committed to my own future self, my own seemingly impossible goal of becoming a professional author during my PhD program. I really wanted to get a six-figure book deal with one of the major publishers. Now, to get a six-figure book deal with one of the major publishers is the 1% of the 1% of all authors, but that's the level I wanted. That was the goal that I was reverse engineering, and that goal led me ultimately to studying blogging and to becoming the top blogger on a platform called medium.com. From 2015 to 2018, I was the top blogger on that platform. I studied intensely how to write viral blog posts, how to communicate effectively, and my blogs were read over 100 million times during those 3 years, allowing me to organically grow an email list of hundreds of thousands of people. Building this huge audience allowed me to achieve my seemingly impossible goal of getting that six-figure book deal before finishing my PhD program. The same year we adopted our 3 kids and had our twins, my first major book, Willpower Doesn't Work, came out. Since then, I've published another 6 books that have now collectively sold millions of copies, including my trilogy with Dan Sullivan, Who Not How, The Gap and the Gain, and 10x is Easier Than 2x. I also wrote a book called Be Your Future Self Now, which explains how you can literally be your desired future self today. That book was the top book in the entire country of South Korea for months. This was a picture of me and Dan Sullivan when we were writing 10x is Easier Than 2x, being interviewed by Joe Polish at a Genius Network event. This is me training at EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system. This is one of the top operating systems for entrepreneurs. Thousands of people were in that audience. And I am regularly asked to train and teach groups of entrepreneurs. This was me speaking at Fund Launch, which is a community of people who are building and scaling funds. This was me teaching a group of 550 dentists the strategic frameworks I'm gonna share with you in this training. My base speaking fee to come and teach these frameworks is $50,000. My base consulting fee for 8-figure businesses, 9-figure businesses, is $250,000 as the base fee. And I have clients who I'm helping go from hundreds of millions of dollars to literally billions in revenue by applying the exact frameworks that I'm gonna show you in this training. The billionaire and tech innovator Peter Thiel asks this question: how can you solve your 10-year goal in the next 6 months? That is the type of thinking that I wanna give to you in this training. In the spirit of what Peter Thiel is saying, I ask you, what is your goal for the next 3 to 5 years? What do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? If you were to think about your future self, 3 to 5 years in the future, what's the most important thing you want to accomplish? Not the 50 things you want to accomplish. I'm saying, what is the number one thing? The most important thing. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. What if you could solve and potentially even achieve most or all of that 3 to 5 year goal in the next 90 days? Let me guess, you might think that that's impossible. You might discard that entirely. Well, before I show you the frameworks and science for how you can actually do this, and yes, I've helped hundreds of people to do this, let me share with you the 4 problems for why you probably won't. Let me be dead honest and simple with you. It does not need to take 3 to 5 years to accomplish the goal in your mind that you want to accomplish. Maybe it won't take 90 days, but it's a lot closer to 90 days if you learn how to focus on the right thing. Which takes us to the first problem, and that's that you're not focused on the right thing. If you want to achieve 10-year goals in the next 6 months or 3 months, as Peter Thiel said, you've got to actually identify the right thing to focus on and put all of your focus on that thing. This takes us to a crucial concept known in rock climbing as the crux. Focusing on the crux is the difference between winners and losers. Very few people even know what the crux is that they're trying to solve, let alone knowing how to solve it. Specifically in rock climbing, there is a crux to any climb, and the crux is the part that if you can't solve, you can't finish the climb. It doesn't matter how well you do all the other parts of the climb. If you can't do the crux, you will not achieve the climb. You will not achieve your goal. Dr. Richard Rumelt, who's one of the most important strategic thinkers of the last 50 years, explains that the crux is similar to the idea of the bottleneck. It's the main thing that needs to be solved if you want to achieve your goal. So if you're thinking about your 3 to 5 year goal, my question for you is, what is the actual crux, the hardest part, the most important part, that if you focused on, if you solved it, you could achieve your goal? Back to the core idea and motivation that everything you're doing is either avoiding what you don't want or approaching what you want. My question is, have you actually identified the crux, the core bottleneck, the one thing, the most important thing that if you solve, you can achieve your goal? How much of your time in the last 30 or 60 days have you spent fully focusing on the crux, the one thing that if you solve it well, you could actually achieve your goal in the next maybe 90 days? Problem number 2, and just as connected, is that you have way too many competing objectives, let alone defining the one thing that you want to solve, and then from there reverse engineering the crux. You likely have way too many competing goals, objectives, distractions that are pulling your attention in 50,000 directions. Steve Jobs said that if you work hard, you can take something that's complex and make it simple. And once you make something simple, you can move mountains. In systems theory, there are 3 core types of systems. There are simple systems, complicated systems, and complex systems. The outside world, the stock market, that's a complex system. You cannot predict what's going to happen in a complex system. But for you, for your life, your objective, if you want to make rapid transformation, if you want to scale, if you want to move mountains, is you've got to take a complex system and make it simple. You cannot scale aggressively a complex system. A complex system by nature has competing goals, conflicting interests, and there's way too many different bottlenecks to be solved to achieve them. Essentially, with a complex system, you are moving in multiple different directions at the same time. The only way for you to make rapid progress, and as I'm going to show you later in this training, impossible goals are the most powerful way to simplify your system. The only way for you to do it is to simplify your focus, to have one core objective, to identify the crux of that, and then to focus fully on that crux. If you simplify the system of your life and business, you will begin achieving more in 90 days than you have in the last 10 years. According to Occam's razor, which is both a strategic and a scientific principle, if you have 2 ideas, the more simple one is always going to be the better one. Albert Einstein said, you want to go with the simplest solution, just don't be too simple. This takes us to problem 3, and this is likely one of the most difficult parts of human psychology. I'm talking about making a true commitment. It is very difficult for human beings to truly commit to something. We like to keep our doors open. We like to be distracted. Making a hard decision, which means cutting off alternative options, cutting off options that both seem good, maybe even seem great, for choosing one thing. This is very difficult, especially if you think you rely on some of those other options, or if they're very compelling and very interesting to you. Until you learn how to actually commit to something, which is very difficult because it means uncommitting to almost everything else. Until you learn how to do that, you will not move fast. You will not make progress. You will be distracted. This takes us to the difference between good strategy and bad strategy. And I can promise you, almost everyone has bad strategy. Let me explain the difference. This is Dr. Richard Rumelt. Having conflicting goals, dedicating resources to unconnected targets, and accommodating incompatible interests are the luxuries of the rich and powerful, but they make for bad strategy. Strategy is at least as much about what an organization does not do as it is about what an organization does. Strategy is scarcity's child. To have strategy rather than vague aspirations is to choose one path. This is why I'm talking about commitment. Commitment and choice are the same thing, and making a committed decision is incredibly difficult. But if you want to achieve your 5 to 10 year goals in the next 90 days, you're going to have to commit. You're going to have to make a decision, which means cutting off disconnected targets or vague aspirations. You've got to actually commit to the thing you feel is most important, and from there, you've got to define the crux that needs to be solved and place your time, attention, and energy on that. This is Peter Drucker, considered the most important management thinker of the last 100 years. He said the job, however, is not to set priorities. That is easy. Everyone can do it. The reason why so few executives concentrate is the difficulty of setting what he calls posteriorities. That is, of deciding the tasks not to tackle and of sticking to the decision. Steve Jobs again said, people think that focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on, but that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the 100 other good ideas there are. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. If you want to learn how to consistently achieve 5 to 10 year goals every 90 days to transform your life more in 90 days than the average person might in a full lifetime, it comes down to committing and saying no to almost everything, to actually choosing a good strategy, for focusing on the thing that's going to move the needle and putting all of your focus on that. I guarantee you that less than 20% of your time is fully focused on innovating and solving that bottleneck, let alone getting your full team and resources centered on that bottleneck. Chances are your time and attention is everywhere. It's distracted. You're saying yes to way too many things. This takes us to our fourth problem. And this is a very difficult problem, actually a problem that likely none of us have ever faced before in our entire lives. And that is the current context and social climate. I'm speaking to you right now in September of 2024, right before the 2024 political elections. Right now, we are at the absolute apex of the political cycle, of the invasiveness, of the toxicity, of the crumbling economy. Right now, the outside world is so pessimistic, so confused, so chaotic. Right now, we are in the eye of the storm, and over the next 3 months, it is only going to get more and more difficult. Not only do I not want this storm to destroy your focus and potentially even destroy your future, like it will for many people, I want to give you science and frameworks to transcend above this storm, to quantum leap through this storm, and to achieve goals that you think are impossible in the midst of this storm. You can achieve 5 to 10 years worth of progress in quarter 4 of 2024, while most of people's time is going to be left in absolute wreckage. This takes us to my solution, which I call Rapid Transformation, the science of achieving impossible goals. Rapid Transformation is a 3-step framework that, from my view, encompasses the core aspects of human psychology. The first step of rapid transformation is your frame. The second is your floor. The third is your focus. Your frame ultimately determines what you see. This is your paradigm, your perspective, your perception. This is the core aspect of human psychology. This is why when it comes to healing and growth, it comes down to reframing a perspective, redefining it. Your frame is the most crucial foundation of your psychology. From there is your floor, which ultimately decides what you do, what you say yes and no to. The floor, as a person, is your dividing line between yes and no. And one of the things that I want to show you is that your floor is much lower than you think it is. You're saying yes to so many things that are opposed to your goal. You're saying yes to almost everything that is not that bottleneck that is going to achieve your goal. The third and final piece of this equation is your focus. Whatever you focus on as a person expands, and the quality and intensity of your focus, as well as what you place it on, is going to determine your results in your life, your ability to learn, your ability to progress. By mastering your frame, your floor, and your focus, you will be on the crux of the thing that's going to solve your problem, and you're going to make more progress every 90 days than you're used to making every 5 to 10 years. To systematically help you refine your frame, raise your floor, and ultimately help you focus with intensity on the right thing, I've created a measure and a system for helping you see where you're at in each of these core categories. And ultimately, I want to show you how you can measure yourself on these 3 things on a weekly and monthly basis. Once you begin refining your frame and raising your floor, you're going to get to the point where on a weekly basis, you're making more progress than you're used to making on a monthly basis, because focus determines the results you get. And a big aspect of this model is raising your floor to the degree that you're letting go of almost everything in your life. Here's an important quote from Dr. Stephen R. Covey, which actually contradicts most of the self-help and business advice. Covey says, "It becomes obvious that if we want to make relatively minor changes in our lives, we can perhaps appropriately focus on our attitudes and our behaviors. But if we want to make significant quantum change, we need to work on our basic paradigms. We can spend weeks, months, even years laboring to change our attitudes and behaviors and not even begin to approach the phenomenon of change that occurs spontaneously when we see things differently." The core aspect of your frame as a human being comes down to how you view time. And this simple model right here shows how most people view time as well as how most people view themselves. Put very simply, this model shows that most people believe that the past determines the present and the present determines the future. They explain their present by first explaining their past. The past is the core domino that knocks over the dominoes of the present and the future. And when you view your life this way, your present is simply a byproduct of your past. In the present, you have very little agency or choice. All you do is blame who you are and what you do on your past. Yet this is the common way that people have been taught to explain themselves. This is a quote from a very innovative book in positive psychology by some of the top researchers in the world, including Marty Seligman. He is the father of positive psychology. In that book, they explain that much of the history of psychology has been dominated by a framework in which people and animals are driven by the past. This view of time will heavily limit who you are and what you can do, not only in the present, but in the future. When you believe that the past determines the present, this is how you get stuck in traumas. This is how you get stuck in very limiting stories and becoming a victim, is that you believe that who you are now is because of what happened in the past. I'm going to show you very soon how you can reframe that, how you can transform that. But before I get into that, it's super important to realize that just as the past determining the present is a problem, so is the present determining the future. You do not want your present life, your present situation, even your present self, to be the basis of the future that you imagine for yourself. There's a lot of research actually on this, including by this man, Dr. Daniel Gilbert, a Harvard psychologist. He explains in his research that most people have a lack of imagination regarding their future self. Instead, what most people do, even teenagers, is they take their past and present selves and they use that as the basis for who they think their future self will be. Even teenagers think that who they are now, their present self, is who they're always going to be. And this is a very false view. It's a very limiting view. But this is the frame that most people have. It is what Carol Dweck would call a fixed mindset, where you believe that who you are now is who you're always going to be. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. Gilbert is that human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished. When you believe that who you are now is who you're always going to be, not only does that limit your future, but it massively limits your possibilities in the present. Your view of time is the most crucial aspect of your frame in the present. And this is the model of time that I want you to adopt. Firstly, you need to understand that it is not your past that determines your present. Psychologically, it is always you in the present that determines the meaning of your past. You have the power to reframe your past, no matter what it was. No matter if it was a traumatic experience. Me, myself, my father being a drug addict, me being in a car crash and almost killing my mom. There are so many things in your past, even if it's just how you frame the day. Think about gratitude, for example. The whole purpose of gratitude is to reframe an experience. So it is your choice in the moment how you frame your past. It is actually the present that controls the past psychologically, not the past that controls the present. When you learn this, you will continuously be able to take your past and turn it into an asset that benefits you in the present rather than a liability that drains you in the present. One thing that's very empowering to know is that memory itself is not an objective entity. The past is not something separate from you. Instead, as Dr. Brent Slife, a psychologist, said, the past is a living part of you in the present. Your memory is a living part of you in the present, and you have the power to reframe and to transform your memory so that it happens for you rather than to you. But just as important on this model is the idea that it is not your present that shapes your future. That's what Dr. Daniel Gilbert is explaining. Most people use their present as the basis for their future. That is not accurate psychologically. It is not the present that determines the future. It is always the future, your future, that determines your present. This was stated very clearly, even almost 100 years ago by Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. He very clearly stated that your psychology, your experience, even your joy and happiness and meaning in the present comes down to your view of the future, your hope in the future, what you're committed to in the future. It is your future that determines not only what you see and how you feel, but what you can do in the present. Because your view of your future heavily influences not only what you see, but the direction you go in the present, you want to get very good at framing your future. Again, this goes counter to how most people approach their lives. Most people take their present life and they use that to imagine their goals. They say, well, this is how much money I made this year. I made 50 grand, so I'm going to go for 55 grand next year, rather than letting a different future transform their life. This is a quote from Buckminster Fuller, considered one of the most innovative thinkers of the 20th century. He says, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Dr. Clayton Christensen, a Harvard business professor and the author of The Innovator's Dilemma, said, creating new things is infinitely easier than changing old things. If we focus on building the new, the old will ultimately go away. This is why this model is so important. Rather than taking your present life, your present system, maybe even your present business, and using that as the basis for your future. And by the way, Dan Sullivan and I explain this as 2x thinking in that book. Rather than taking the present and using that to shape the future, you always want to create a new model, a new future that makes your existing model obsolete. And this is exactly what Daniel Gilbert said. He said that we need imagination. We need to imagine a future self, an identity even, that is massively different from our current self. This is a huge aspect of your frame, is getting connected to your future self, a very different future self than you are today. Maybe even a future self that seems impossible to you. Maybe you have gotten to the point where you've given up on your future self. Maybe you have stopped imagining that you could achieve things that were impossible. I remember when I was in the first year of my PhD program and I wanted to get that 6-figure book deal. Yes, it seemed impossible. Yes, that seemed like a future self that was so far away I couldn't imagine it. But the reason I was able to go very quickly in achieving that goal was because not only did I allow myself to imagine that future self, but I allowed myself to embody the identity of my future self, and that goal actually made my existing life obsolete. That goal massively simplified my process and allowed me to achieve goals that authors and agents told me was 10, 20 years away. It allowed me to do that in less than 2 years. Part of what I'm trying to do here is to remind you that your future self could be incomprehensibly different than your life right now. And I want you to think about it this way. Think about your own past self. Think about you 5, 10 years ago. There are things in your life right now that to your past self, maybe even a year ago, would have seemed incomprehensible. There are things that you have done, things you've achieved, that your past self could have never imagined. You are fundamentally different from your past self. But also, your future self. Don't limit your future self. Don't use your present self as the basis for your future. Let a seemingly impossible future self. And I'm going to show you in a second the science on impossible goals and why these types of goals, that model, is the most powerful thing you can do for your life right now. But I just want to shake you a little bit and remind you that your future self, maybe even in 90 days, could seem impossible to you now. Do not limit your future self. As part of the measuring system my team and I have created to help you identify the quality of your frame, as well as your floor, which is what you say yes and no to, and your focus, focusing on the right thing with intensity, you will see in this measurement how much your frame is based on your past or based on your future. If you want a powerful frame, and if you want to begin making powerful leaps forward, you always want a new model that is making your old model obsolete. You want a new frame that simplifies your life, that simplifies your decision, that raises your floor. This picture right here represents data. A core aspect of our frame is learning how to distinguish the signal from the noise. According to William James, the father of American psychology, he said there are millions of things going on literally right around you right now. There are sounds happening around you. There are smells, noises. There are so many things happening around you right now that you're not noticing. Why, he says? Because they're not relevant to your frame. Your frame determines not only what you see and what you pay attention to. As an example, if you're in a noisy room and someone calls your name, you will hear it, even in the midst of a noisy room. Think about your algorithm. Think about your newsfeed. You see what is relevant to you. Whatever you see, that actually says more about you than the outside world. Not only does your frame determine what you see and what you pay attention to, it also highlights the relevant pathways to getting towards your goals. In psychology, a crucial aspect of both hope and motivation is a concept called pathways thinking. We are always trying to generate effective pathways to getting to where we want to go. One of the problems that most people face is because they use their present as the basis for their future, there's way too many conflicting and competing options for moving forward. In the first chapter of 10x is easier than 2x, I told the story of my son Caleb, who's going to be a junior in high school. He's a tennis player, and one of the things that his coach asked him while I was writing that book is, what is your goal for tennis? Caleb said that he wanted to play college tennis. And his coach said, why isn't your goal to go pro? For the purposes of this video, in my mind, it really doesn't matter what Caleb's goal is, but let's just imagine his goal is actually to go pro, which from his perspective is an impossible goal. If he actually wanted to go for pro, most of the pathways that he's currently on, most of his current process, in psychology, process is called deliberate practice. Most of his pathways that he's going on right now, which are based on his frame, his future of going for college, most of those paths would become ineffective. They would be weeded out. Because that goal is so high and so hard, almost nothing Caleb is doing right now would work. Where we live in Orlando, there are genuinely hundreds of possible pathways for him reaching his college goal. But if he actually committed to the goal of going pro, almost none of those pathways would work for that goal. The goal determines the process. The goal determines the system. The goal determines the floor and the filter. And when you begin going for seemingly impossible goals, almost everything becomes a no. The goal becomes so high that, like Steve Jobs says,
focusing is about saying no.
This is one of the reasons to have a new model or a new future or a future self that seems impossible, is because it weeds out almost all of the noise and all of the distractions from your current frame. Almost everything becomes irrelevant. Almost everything becomes a no. The floor goes very, very high when you begin pursuing impossible goals, and this then allows you to focus on the crux, on the thing that needs to be solved to achieve your impossible goal. This takes me to Elon Musk's 5-step model for making decisions. This is the first principles thinking he's used to scale multiple billion-dollar companies and to literally change multiple industries. The first step of his process is to always question requirements. This comes down to questioning the frame, questioning what is actually required. This takes me back to you and your own 5 to 10 year goal. What is actually required to achieve that goal? Chances are you think that a lot of things are required to achieve your goal that are not actually required. This is why he says, question requirements, question your assumptions. Because people do not question the requirements of their goal, this leads them to doing what Elon Musk calls optimizing many things that shouldn't exist. As he says, most people are optimizing things that shouldn't exist. Most businesses are optimizing things that shouldn't exist. Think about your own life right now. This takes us to the idea of the frame and the floor, that almost everything is below the floor. Almost everything you're doing likely in your business is in that 80% of things that is generating almost no results. This is why you build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. You go for the higher goal that forces you to stop optimizing the things that shouldn't exist. Hence, the second step in his framework is to remove more than you think. And he says a lot more. As people, we have a bias towards addition, towards adding more steps to the equation, towards adding more products, towards adding more goals. If you really study the masters and people who have done big things, it's not about addition, it's always about subtraction. Removing goals, removing steps of the equation, removing things that shouldn't exist. Once you begin eliminating many of those things from your life, you're immediately going to start propelling forward. As you remove more and more from your life that shouldn't exist, you go from a complex system to a simple system. You clarify the thing you're actually trying to accomplish, and you can then simplify your system down to the crux, the main thing that needs to be solved, so that then you can focus and make progress. You want to go aggressive and intense on a simple system, and if you can do that over 90 days, you will make more progress on your goals than you likely have in the last 5 to 10 years. Over time, you automate and systemize such that what was impossible to you now just becomes normalized. A fundamental aspect of refining your frame is questioning your assumptions, questioning your requirements, and then ultimately going to your floor, which is raising the floor and removing more than you think, so that then you can aggressively focus on the crux. This takes us to some of the science on impossible goals. This is one of my favorite research articles on the topic. Let's first start by defining it. In the psychological literature, they actually use the term stretch goal. Here's how it's defined. We define a stretch goal as an organizational goal with an objective probability of attainment that may be unknown, but is seemingly impossible given current capabilities. Current capabilities are your current practices, skills, and knowledge. Later in the article, it says, because stretch goals involve extreme redefinitions of what an organization is able to be and achieve. And by the way, a definition is a frame. Going back to your future self, these types of goals, these impossible goals, they redefine not only who you are, who your future self is, but who your business is. According to Rousseau, where performance expectations are elevated well beyond the limits of past experience, and where previously successful frameworks are questioned, revised, or discarded, prior performance is often a poor guide for stretch goal achievement. And this shifts the performer's attention away from old routines and assumptions toward novel and creative approaches. This is the key aspect of impossible goals, and it connects deeply with the science on future self, is that you want a new model, a new frame, a new reality, a future self, as well as a business that seems impossible. The impossible goals force you to let go of almost everything you're doing, because almost everything you're doing is based on your past assumptions, your past routines, your past strategies. Almost all of those are ineffective. Almost all of those are optimizing something that should not exist. The impossible goal is the new model that simplifies, that disrupts, that changes your frame. In psychology, there's a concept called selective attention. Whatever you focus on expands. That new goal will change your frame. It'll allow you to start finding and focusing on the crux. If you can identify the thing that will actually move your life forward, move the needle forward and achieve your impossible goal, then you are operating from the future rather than the past. Then you're going to start making more progress in the next 90 days than you have in the last 5 years. Here's a breakdown of the core aspects of your frame. First, you see the world as you are, not as the world is. You see the world through a frame, through a lens, as Covey said, through a paradigm. And importantly, you don't see it accurately. This is why you always want to reframe and continuously refine your frame. Your view of time is the core aspect of your frame. Your view of your past and your view of your future are ultimately what shape your frame in the present. The past and future aren't realities psychologically. They're tools for better operating in the present. As you get better at reframing your past, you'll be liberated in the present. As you get better at creating a new vision for your future self, in the present, you'll be able to let go of almost all the distractions in your life and be able to find the crux, the thing that really matters to focus on. You're gonna be able to focus on that intensely to make big progress in the present. Operating from the present into the future is what Buckminster Fuller called fighting the existing reality. You never wanna take the present as the basis for the future you create, even though research shows that's how most people and most businesses operate. Building a new model, which, as I showed you, impossible goals are that model. Connecting to the idea that you can actually achieve things that right now, based on your limiting assumptions, you can begin achieving things that are impossible. That impossible goal, the new model, is what makes the existing model, which is your present life, obsolete. This is the fastest way to make change. Again, Clayton Christensen said, building something new is infinitely easier than trying to change the old. I've already given you most of the foundation, but let me give you a little bit more on how the frame influences your floor. As I've already showed you, your frame determines what you see. And if you're going for too small of goals, there's too much noise in your system. You can say yes to almost anything when you have small goals. But when you go for impossible goals, first, it forces you to weed out your old definitions of who you are. But second, you cannot apply the old ideas and old strategies of yesterday to achieve impossible goals. So this forces you to operate from your future rather than operating from your past. And almost nothing will work to achieve impossible goals. So it forces you to find the crux, the actual thing that matters. This is the signal among the noise. To repeat Richard Rumelt, strategy is at least as much about what an organization does not do as about what it does. One of the most powerful aspects of setting an impossible goal and raising your floor is that you're going to have to say no to almost everything. You're going to have to start eliminating the things in your life, even that you love, because they're stopping you from making the progress that you want. They're limiting your future self. You are focused on too many things, which means you're not focused at all. A big part of measuring the quality of your floor is not asking how much you've added in the last week, but how much you've subtracted. Here are the fundamental aspects of your floor as a person. One of my favorite quotes is that the system is designed to defend the system, and you can't change the system by trying to fight against it. Instead, you need a new reality. You need a new vision of the future, which disrupts the system. This is why impossible goals are crucial to raising your floor. And by the way, your floor as a person is your system. It's your existing life. It's your outside life. While your frame is your inner world, your floor is your outer world. You can know what your floor is by simply observing your life and observing what you say yes and no to. Your goal is what determines your system. Most people, they let the existing system determine their goals. They let the present situation determine their future. You always want the goal, and ideally an impossible goal, to determine your system. And when you have a goal that's that big, again, like my son Caleb, it simplifies the system because almost nothing will work for the impossible goals. None of your old assumptions will work. None of your old strategies will work. Very few things will work to help you achieve 10x, 100x growth. That's why it forces you to focus on the crux. The beauty of pursuing goals that you right now think are impossible is that they force you to simplify your life in the present. This is how they transform your life. This is how they raise your floor. Ultimately, if you want to begin making rapid progress, you're going to need to remove more than you think, a lot more. And there are aspects of your life, aspects of your business right now that you don't think you can remove, but once you actually begin being honest with yourself, which is a key aspect of raising your floor, and as you begin uprooting those aspects of your system, you're going to be shocked at how fast you can move forward. Ultimately, the purpose of impossible goals is to help you create a simple system that you can actually accelerate on. A massive aspect of raising your floor and beginning to let go of things, and I know this because I've trained thousands of entrepreneurs and CEOs, is that it begins to feel very risky. It feels risky to let go of certain things, maybe even letting go of certain businesses. As an example, there was a guy who had a 10-year goal, and I said, what if you went for it in 1 year? Because time isn't a reality, it's a tool. And he said, if I had to go for it in 1 year, I'd have to sell my existing business. And I said, well, what were you going to do with that existing business anyways? He said, I was just going to keep it for the 10 years, but if I go for that goal in 1, I've got to let go of it now. Ultimately, that's what he did, and he achieved his 10-year goal in 90 days. But sometimes it feels risky. It can feel risky to let go of certain products. When Steve Jobs came back to Apple, they had over 30 products. He ultimately whittled it down to 4. That felt risky to the team. It can feel very risky letting go of things, but this is what I want you to understand. The reason it feels risky is because as people, we avoid loss. We hate loss. We hate letting go of our security blankets. The thing you need to understand is that the new goal raises the floor, and everything above the floor is ultimately a fundamentally better decision. Whether it's a new team member that's better than anyone you've ever hired, or a strategy, anything above that floor is fundamentally a sounder and better decision than things you've been doing in the past. It is not risky to let go of the things that are holding you back. In fact, anything that's below the floor is directly opposing your goal. Anything that's below your floor is literally at this point holding you back. Perhaps in the past, it was the thing that got you here. At this point, it is not the thing that's going to get you there. To this point, I've already helped you understand the fundamentals of frame, floor, and focus, and ultimately that you want to focus on the bottleneck. Back to this research article on impossible goals. It says this at the top at that red arrow. Dr. Rousseau put it this way: stretch goals or impossible goals motivate high performance by mandating creativity and assumption-breaking thinking. Remember, these types of goals redefine who you are and what you can do, and they force you to break your assumptions. Dr. Winters said the following in the context of stretch goals and organizations developing new capabilities. It is not a secret that high aspirations can often contribute to high achievement. These sentiments are echoed in the business press. Steve Kerr, former learning officer at General Electric and Goldman Sachs, said this as it relates to stretch goals. If done right, a stretch target gets your people to perform in ways they never imagined possible. It's a goal that, by definition, you don't know how to reach. You might, for instance, ask your people to cut costs by half, or reduce product development time from years to months in order to find dramatically new ways of doing business. Pursuing goals that are seemingly impossible might stimulate exploratory learning, specifically because radically new approaches are literally required. Remember, you cannot change things by fighting the existing reality. You need a new model that makes the old one obsolete. As you go for impossible goals, it forces you to find the crux of the matter. That's what they call exploratory learning. It forces you to find those new and effective ways that are actually going to move you towards the goal, that are actually going to move the needle. Rather than being busy, you can finally start being hyper productive. The impossible goals are what allow you to find the most important people to team with. In the book, The 80-20 Individual, Richard Koch explains that both ideas and people are what change the world. He says that the most important part of any business is not maintaining your existing operations, which is doing effectively today what you did yesterday the same way you did it yesterday. Maintaining the status quo is not how you grow. Instead, growth means creating something new and valuable. Again, you don't change things by fighting the existing reality. You have to create something new. Growth is driven by individuals of small, self-selected teams. This could be a team in a big organization or of a new venture. It is ideas and powerful individuals, 80-20 individuals, that change the game. And these 80-20 individuals are not only yourself, if you're going to start achieving 10 years of growth every 90 days, but they're also the people you team with. As you raise your floor, you're going to have to get really powerful people on your team. You can't have B players on your team. Those are the people that are trying to defend the existing system. Those are the people who want the status quo. Those are the people who are operating from the past. Your impossible goal is going to help you find the best people who will help you achieve it. When you get the right who's on your team, the things that once seemed impossible become inevitable. The right people on your team can help you achieve things that you never thought you could do. But these are not the kind of people that want to be managed. These are the people that want to be led. You give them an impossible goal and you give them the responsibility, the autonomy to achieve it themselves. Self-determination theory says that high performers need high autonomy, high trust, and high relationships. They want goals that are impossible, and they want you to lead them there. It is individuals and ideas that change the world. Less than 1% of the population has changed the world. You're one of that 1%. You want to get to the point where every week you can measure the quality of your focus. Are you focused on the thing that's actually moving the needle? Are you involving people around you that are helping you move the needle, or are the people around you literally holding you back? The core fundamentals of focus are that your results directly come from what you focus on and how well you focus on it. The quality of both your psychology as well as your success as a person comes down to what you're focused on and how well you can focus on it. Leaders focus on results and getting the type of people who can achieve those results. One of the people I recently coached, he was a brand new entrepreneur and he was going for $1 million in his business. And he had recently hired someone he felt to be a rock star. I told him his goal was too small. His goal was too small, and if that person on his team was actually a rock star, that person would not be happy in that business. So he changed his goal in that meeting. He changed his goal from 1 million in revenue to 3, which admittedly felt impossible to him. And he then texted that rock star and said, I think we should go for 3 million this year. What do you think? Immediately, he got a text back from that salesperson, and he said, that's more in alignment with what I thought we could do. Within minutes of that text, he started getting a ton of texts from that salesperson with ideas about how they could get to 3 million. All of those ideas would not have come if he wasn't going for the impossible goal. Ultimately, you want to partner with people who can help you achieve the impossible. Success comes down to who, not how. Back to you and your 5-year goal and helping you achieve your own 5-year goal in the next 90 days. We are at the apex of distraction. We are at the apex of social strife and economic meltdowns. Do you know your main objective? Do you have a complicated or a simple system of life and business? Have you identified the crux bottleneck to solve? How much of your energy, creativity, and intensity are going into that crux? Or, like most people, are you unclear on your core vision? Like most, are you unclear on the crux to solve? Like most, is your focus all over the place? Like most, are you caught up in the noise of the outside world on stuff you cannot control or influence? Like most, are you unwilling to make hard decisions to remove the lesser goals and the distractions? And are you deluding yourself into thinking that you're actually making progress? Do you have good strategy or bad strategy? Do you want science and frameworks for upgrading your frame, raising your floor, and deepening your focus? Do you want to learn how to achieve what you believe to be lifetime growth in the next 3 years? Do you want to learn how to leverage psychological time to begin achieving goals that you believe to be impossible? Are you willing to face your limiting assumptions and your hidden commitments to uproot those and to 10x your life? Do you want to have a systematic way of continually measuring the quality of your frame, your floor, and your focus? Do you want to join me over the next 90 days while the world is distracted and confused and make a quantum leap to your future self? Do you want to make more progress in quarter 4 of 2024 alone than you have in the past 5+ years? If so, then I invite you to join me in my 90-day challenge called Above the Storm, the 2024 quarter 4 Rapid Transformation Intensive. This 90-day challenge is to help you master your frame, your floor, and your focus. Here is a week-by-week breakdown for how we will take your 5 to 10 year goal and begin aggressively going for it as your impossible goal for quarter 4. Every week, you will get a new training, new tools, new journal prompts to help you make rapid progress. In week 1, I'm going to give you a training on my future self tool. You will also be able to evaluate your week 1 progress with my rapid transformation measure. In week 2, I'm going to give you a training on impossible goals and how they simplify your system. We're going to do our weekly coaching call, and you're going to be able to evaluate your frame, floor, and focus for week 2. In week 3, I'm going to train you on my thesis refinement tool. We'll do our weekly group coaching, and you'll get your week 3 evaluation on your frame, your floor, and your focus. In week 4, you're going to do a deep analysis for how much you've changed your life in the first month. If you're aggressive, you will see in that evaluation that you've changed more and you've grown more in October alone than you probably have in the last few years. You're also going to get your week 4 evaluation. In week 5, you're going to get a training on the simple system for scale tool. We're going to do our group coaching, and you're going to get your week 5 evaluation. In week 6, you're going to get training on the removal of the big no tool. You're going to learn how to remove more than you think. We're going to do our group coaching. You're going to get your week 6 frame, floor, and focus evaluation to see the quality. And over time, you're going to see how the quality of your frame, floor, and focus transform. In week 7, you're going to get training on the psychological flexibility tool. This is going to help you operate more and more from your future self. This is also going to help you let go of the limiting assumptions of your past. We're going to do our weekly group coaching, and you're going to get your week 7 evaluation on your frame, floor, and focus. At the end of month 2, you're going to do a deep review of November. You're going to see that in November, your focus has gotten even simpler. Your system has gotten even simpler. You're clear on your objective. Your floor has gotten higher. Your life is simpler. Your focus is simpler. And in that month, you're going to see that you made way more progress because you'll have been on the crux. Likely you'll have let go of possibly team members. You'll have hired 80-20 individuals. You'll see that your progress is becoming far more intense and far more easy. You'll get your week 8 evaluation of your own frame, floor, and focus. And over time, you're going to see that your frame, floor, and focus are going to get massively cleaner and clearer. In week 9, you're going to get the results commitment tool. I'm going to teach you how to commit to your impossible goal and how you're going to reverse engineer that process. We're going to do our weekly group coaching session, and you're going to get your week 9 frame, floor, and focus output. In week 10, you're going to get a deep dive training on transformational leadership and 80-20ing your team. I'm going to take you through that tool. We're going to do group coaching, and you're going to get your week 10 frame, floor, and focus evaluation. In week 11, I'm going to train you on acceleration and innovation on the bottleneck. As you focus more and more on the crux, you're going to innovate that crux. You're going to elevate that crux. This is how you're going to achieve your impossible goals quickly, is focusing on that thing. Whatever you focus on expands. We will do our weekly group coaching session, and you're going to get your week 11 frame, floor, and focus output. Finally, at the end of the challenge, and this is going to be after the political election, after Thanksgiving, after all of the madness and nonsense, the storm that's going to confuse most people, you're going to review your progress over those 90 days, and you will see that you are not the same person. You're going to see that you've made more progress during those 90 days than you have in the last several years. You're going to learn how to evaluate your 90 days based on where you were at the beginning of those 90 days. And you're going to shock yourself because you will have achieved things that your past self, even at the beginning of this challenge, will have thought were impossible. We will then set you up for 2025 so that you can achieve more in 2025 than you have in the last 10 years. You will have a visual perspective of how well you're doing on your frame, floor, and focus every single week. At the end of every week, you'll get your output on your frame, floor, and focus. And over time, your frame is going to be operating more and more from your future. Your floor each week will get higher and higher, such that you're simplifying your life and focusing on the thing that matters. Also, each week, you'll get a score on your focus and how much you actually progressed in terms of tangible results each week. I strongly encourage you to be in this 90-day challenge, to go for your 5 to 10 year goal in the next 90 days and to strip out almost everything in your life that shouldn't exist. This 90-day process of rising above the storm is not $250,000 like my consulting fee. It's not $50,000, my fee for giving a basic keynote. It is not $20,000, which is the price of my AMP Platinum program, which is a training program for entrepreneurs I had for 4 years, which I sold earlier this year. It is also not the price of the previous 60 and 90-day challenges I've done in the last 12 months. I know that it is heavily difficult and uncertain times right now. Out of respect for the storm that we are in, I have massively lowered the price of this challenge to less than $1,000. It is $997 to be a part of this 90-day challenge. In everything I do, I try to provide 10 times the value and impact. This challenge is no different. Here's everything you get as part of the 90-day Above the Storm Rapid Transformation Intensive. First, you get access to the full 12-week challenge. You get innovative frameworks and tools, the very tools that I provide to my 8- and 9-figure consulting clients. You get weekly journal prompts for transforming your frame. You get weekly group coaching calls with me every single week of the challenge. Every Friday, we will do a 90-minute group coaching call together. Every Monday, you'll get a new training from me on the tools and frameworks. Also, every week, you'll get access to the Rapid Transformation Measure so that you can see your progress visually every single week on where you're at now with the quality of your frame, your floor, and your focus. Every week, you'll graphically and visually see how much you're transforming, how much you're operating more from the future, how much you're raising your floor, and how much your focus is on the crux that matters. Because I both respect you and this context, and because it's in my bones to provide 10 times the value or more, I have a full money-back guarantee if you're not blown away by this challenge. But this is where it gets really interesting and exciting. If you actually hit your 5-year goal during those 90 days, and I've done these challenges before, people do this. If you actually hit your 5-year goal, I will give you your money back for that success, and we will celebrate that together. What are you waiting for? I invite you to join me. Learn these frameworks, rise above the storm, quantum leap above the storm, achieve more in the next 90 days than you have in the past 5 to 10 years. Maybe achieve things that you think are impossible. If you have any questions or concerns at all, email support@benjaminhardy.com. My team will quickly respond to all of your questions. Ultimately, your future is your biggest security. I invite you to commit to your future self. I invite you to apply these frameworks, this science, and to achieve goals that you think are impossible. I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Click the link down below. Join the challenge. October 1st is when this challenge officially begins. You cannot join after October 1st. He who hesitates is lost. Join the challenge, and let's achieve your impossible goals together.